Well, Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire who pleaded guilty in 2005 to soliciting a 14-year-old girl for sex, may be facing a new slew of charges thanks to a renewed push to have that guilty plea thrown out. As we've been reporting, Epstein is facing allegations of sexually abusing at least 40 underage girls at his private island, Little St. James, an island where former President Bill Clinton made dozens of trips by taking Epstein's private jet. And also connected to the scandal, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, and famed lawyer Alan Dershowitz. I talked earlier with author and former FBI profiler Jim Clemente from Los Angeles, and I began by asking him about the likelihood that Epstein's plea deal could actually be overturned or thrown out.
Well, I think the reason why they want to throw it out is because I think the agreement that was made was based on what they knew at the time. I think it could get thrown out if he lied and didn't disclose everything that he said he would. And also the deal that was made gave him sort of immunity on certain cases, but they want to blow the doors open and actually charge him with a whole bunch more now.
Yeah, as we dig into this story, the more corrupt it seems to be. According to the New York Daily News, not only did the feds agree to keep the details of the plea deal out of the court record, the filings show that, but also for a short time, the very short time that Epstein was in jail, he, quote, wound up getting special treatment behind bars. He was allowed out on work release for up to 16 hours a day, 6 times a week, and reportedly had his own private wing in the Palm Beach jail with his own security guard paid for by him. Is this a man who was only asked to go through the motions of punishment with no actual punishment, even for the sweet deal he got?
That does not sound like prison to me. That sounds like he basically got a very good deal, and it certainly doesn't happen to people who don't have money. This is the result of, if these allegations are true, and especially the vast numbers of these allegations, this is a very bad man who got away with a whole lot because he was so rich, and it seems like the system just catered to that as well.
It seems like it would be highly irregular for something like this to happen, but in the case that the plea deal was thrown out, do you think that there could be a deeper investigation into how that plea deal came about in the first place? Could prosecutors themselves come under scrutiny or even some kind of criminal charge?
Well, possibly, but you know, there's prosecutorial discretion when they're doing this, and they have to weigh basically the chances of winning a trial, the fact that putting these victims on the stand could be very traumatic for them, and a lot of the victims also have other problems. So in order to insulate the victims from going through the sort of torture of having to testify at trial, they may have made a reasonable decision to do that. But again, it depends a lot. I think it would only get thrown out if there's some indication that Epstein did not fully disclose. He was not actually accurate in his disclosures, and that more information came out that sort of undermines that deal.
You mentioned about the victims in this case, which is a fairly interesting story in and of itself. Obviously, any young woman who is kept on an island like this, in some cases referred to as sex slaves, in other cases they went there quote unquote voluntarily. When you're a minor, you can't really go there voluntarily for those kinds of acts. But even so, as you mentioned, there is a whole process of character assassination that's taking place even right now. How do you cut through all of that in this media 24 spin cycle?
Well, I think you have to be very careful. You have to scrutinize both the allegations and I think the pushback from the people who are alleged to have committed these crimes. I think there's a very careful balance that has to be made. We can't just take everything wholesale, but when you have corroboration, such as they claim to have found receipts for books on S&M and sex slavery, and that could corroborate some of the allegations that were made by some of these accusers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And certainly, again, you know, any young woman who's involved in this is going to have come from some kind of probably troubled background, and so it's easy to dig up dirt if we, again, as the media, allow that to become the center of this. Certainly, Alan Dershowitz is trying to make it the center of this.
Well, I think if you look at Dershowitz's rebuttal, basically, it's very different than what I've seen him do when he's standing up for a client in the news. He was incredibly emphatic, I think very compellingly so, and he was very, very specific about his denials. And I think those specificities will help to say, well, these things can be proven or disproven. So I think he'd be really a fool if he made that kind of a very specific denial when that could be disproven. I think that tends to sort of corroborate that he's probably telling the truth. I don't know whether all the allegations are true or all the allegations are false, but clearly Epstein has a history of molesting underage girls, and these allegations are consistent with that history.
Let me ask you this finally. The woman at the center of this case, she's identified as Jane Doe number 3. She alleges in court papers that Epstein kept her as a sex slave from 1999 to 2002. Dershowitz, as we mentioned, he wants her 2 attorneys disbarred. Those attorneys are now suing Dershowitz for defamation. It's worth mentioning one of the attorneys here is Paul Castle. He's a former federal judge and a law professor at the University of Utah. I bring this up because this guy isn't just some ambulance chaser. How important is it to look at the character of the attorneys who are now representing her in this case and say certainly they're seeing something here that maybe the rest of us haven't seen yet?
Well, it's possible, but also I think there's a very careful, quote, legal strategy at play here, in that the allegations are only being made in legal filings. They're not being made in public, which would then expose them to defamation lawsuits. So I think that we really have to look at the playing that's going back and forth here. I think Dershowitz made those statements knowing that he was exposing himself to defamation lawsuits. I think those other lawyers have not done that because maybe they don't believe the allegations that they actually set forth in the filings.
Interesting insight. Thank you so much, former FBI profiler and author Jim Clemente. Appreciate your time.